All right. Buckle up for a deep dive. We're heading into a world that sounds like science fiction, but it's actually based on some pretty fascinating historical research. We're talking Nazi occultism,
Yeah.
and how it might connect to secret government projects and maybe even time travel. You sent over some excerpts from The Black Sun by Peter Moon, and let me tell you, this book is packed with some wild theories.
It's definitely a fascinating read. One thing that really stands out to me is how Moon, how he connects all these events and people that seem completely unrelated. Like he's weaving this big narrative, that goes through history, conspiracy theories, and occult beliefs.
So let's unpack some of this. One of the most captivating stories in The Black Sun is this thing called the Philadelphia experiment, supposedly happened back in 1943. Moon claims that the Navy was trying to make the USS Eldridge invisible to radar, but they ended up making it disappear completely. Not just from radar, but vanish from sight altogether.
Yeah, and the stories about what happened to the sailors on board are, they're pretty disturbing. Moon describes mental disorientation, some of them even merging with the ship is a chilling story. And Moon uses it to introduce this idea of the Montauk Project, which he claims was basically a continuation of the Philadelphia experiment research. But this time, it was at Camp Hero on Long Island.
Montauk, yeah. I've heard about that place. It's already kind of mysterious on its own. And Moon adds this whole other layer with stories from locals, people saying they saw Nazi U-boats off the coast and rumors of these underground facilities beneath the base. It's like something straight out of a spy movie.
Totally. I mean, Moon specifically says in his disclaimer that he believes in the U.S. government, as it's laid out in the Constitution. So it's not like he's trying to attack the government itself. It's more like he's exploring these potential hidden agendas, right?
That's an interesting point. So it's not like everything the government does is bad, but there might be things going on that we don't know about, and those things could have huge implications.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He wants us to question the official story, to look deeper and consider different perspectives.
Now, Moon connects this Montauk Project to some pretty big names in occultism. You've got Aleister Crowley, who visited Montauk back in 1918, and he even mentions a Duncan Cameron in his autobiography. What's the deal with this Cameron guy?
This is where it gets really interesting. The Cameron family name pops up over and over again in Moon's book, and it's always connected to important occult figures and events. For example, Jack Parsons, the rocket scientist, he was a follower of Crowley. Parsons was involved in something called the Babylon working. It was this ritual involving sex magic, and he did it with a woman named Cameron.
Wait, hold on. Sex magic? That's a new one for me.
It's a complicated topic. It's often linked to ceremonial magic and manipulating energies. Parsons and Cameron believed they were trying to open a portal to another dimension.
Wow, okay, so we're talking some pretty intense stuff here. And Moon sees these, weird coincidences with the Cameron name. There's a deeper occult network going on. But some people might say, come on, just because they have the same last name doesn't mean there's a giant conspiracy. How does Moon address that?
He admits it's not, hard proof or anything, but he presents these coincidences as patterns worth looking into, like he's building a case using these connections as clues to this bigger hidden story.
Okay, let's switch gears for a sec. Let's talk about this supposed Nazi presence on Long Island. We know the German Bund was active there in the 1930s. They even had a Camp Siegfried, with a street called Adolf Hitler Boulevard, which is pretty disturbing on its own. But Moon ties this to the Montauk Project, right?
Yeah, he points out how close Camp Siegfried was to what became Brookhaven National Laboratory. And he thinks Brookhaven is directly connected to Montauk. It's like these locations were chosen for a reason, there was some bigger plan in mind.
And Moon tells the story about Robert Cooper, a Montauk tribal leader. Cooper called for an investigation into police brutality and got a lot of pushback for it. Moon suggests this might be evidence of, leftover Nazi influence in the area. What do you think? Is that connection a bit of a stretch?
It's definitely provocative. It makes you wonder how these extremist ideas can stick around,
Yeah.
How they can influence power structures long after the groups themselves are gone. Moon doesn't say there's a direct link, for sure.
Yeah.
But he wants us to consider the possibility.
Okay, so we've got these possible Nazi connections, secret government projects, and all these occult figures, all happening in Montauk. And then Moon introduces us to Max, this German guy who was adopted and raised in Montauk. And get this, he claimed to have built his own flying saucers.
It's a wild story, right? And Max wasn't just some amateur. He supposedly could absorb and discharge electricity, like a human battery.
Oh, hold on. A human battery building flying saucers. It's getting stranger by the minute. Did Max have any connection to this Nazi presence in Montauk?
Actually, yeah, he did. He talked about seeing Nazi activity in Montauk during World War II. He mentioned an underground submarine pen and even sightings of Nazis in town. It's another piece of the puzzle that Moon uses to connect all these dots.
Okay, so there's definitely a pattern emerging here. Moon's taking these seemingly random events and weaving them into a much bigger picture. But is this all just speculation, or does he have any real evidence to back it up?
Moon uses a bunch of different sources to build his case. Eyewitness accounts, historical records, even his own personal experiences. He's not just throwing out crazy ideas. He's trying to give us a way to understand these complicated, often hidden connections.
All right, let's talk about another big character in Moon's story, Ewan Cameron. He was a psychiatrist, pretty controversial, known for his psychic driving techniques. What were those exactly, and how do they fit into all of this?
Cameron was like a pioneer in mind control. He came up with this psychic driving method, using tape loops, mental stress, and sensory deprivation to basically break down a patient's personality and then reprogram their thoughts and behavior.
That sounds terrifying. And Moon introduces us to Anna. She says she was Cameron's control, meaning she was subjected to his mind control experiments. What does her story tell us about Cameron and his work?
Anna's account is really disturbing. She says Cameron was part of this elite group called the Controllers. They believed in Aryan supremacy and wanted to manipulate time itself. It's a scary look into the dark side of mind control research.
Wow, so they weren't just trying to control minds, they wanted to control the very fabric of reality. This is like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Right. And Moon takes it even further by connecting Cameron to Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy. Hess supposedly flew to Scotland in 1941 for a time travel ritual.
Wait, a time travel ritual? Was he talking about actual time travel, or is that more symbolic?
That's a good question. Moon doesn't say for sure if Hess was actually trying to time travel. But he does suggest that Hess's flight was more than just a diplomatic mission. He thinks there was something much more esoteric going on, something potentially dangerous.
Okay, this deep dive is getting more and more intriguing. We've got Nazi occultism, secret government projects, mind control, and now maybe even time travel. What other fascinating connections does Moon uncover in The Black Sun?
Well, he kind of goes from time travel to this unexpected connection between Islam and the goddess.
Islam and the goddess, that's not a pairing you hear every day. I always thought of Islam as, a pretty patriarchal religion.
Yeah, it's true. Islam does have those traditional rules about women, but Moon argues that there's this deeper level of reverence for the feminine principle within Islamic tradition.
Okay, I'm listening. How does he make that connection?
He points to the reverence of the Kaaba and the Black Stone in Mecca. You see, he suggests that those could be symbolic representations of the goddess.
I never thought about it that way before. Are there any other examples he gives?
He mentions the Arabian Nights as an example of how the feminine principle was honored in early Islamic culture. Remember Scheherazade, the storyteller who outsmarts the Sultan and avoids execution.
Oh yeah, Scheherazade, her stories are amazing. So is Moon suggesting that these stories have, hidden occult knowledge in them?
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
He argues that Islam might have this deeper esoteric layer that's been, lost or forgotten over time.
This is really making me think about Islam differently. Let's move on. What else does Moon cover in The Black Sun?
Well, next he introduces this group called the Vril Society. They were a German occult group who believed in this powerful life force called Vril.
The Vril Society, weren't they supposedly connected to UFOs or something?
Exactly. They claimed to receive transmissions from Aldebaran, this star system. They believed it had an advanced Aryan civilization. And they thought they could use this knowledge to build, get this, flying discs.
Wow, sounds pretty ambitious. Did they actually build any working flying saucers?
Well, there's no proof of that. But Moon presents their claims as part of this bigger idea about, hidden technology and the influence of secret societies.
So we're talking about the possibility that these groups were working on advanced tech that's been kept secret. That definitely fits into the whole sci-fi element we talked about earlier. Where does the deep dive go from here?
Next, Moon brings up Victor Schauberger. He was an Austrian scientist who developed technology based on implosion, not explosion.
Implosion? How does that even work?
Schauberger believed that implosion is a natural force, a harmonious force. Unlike explosion, which is destructive, he saw it as a way to tap into nature's power.
It sounds pretty fascinating, but also a little out there. Did Schauberger have any connections to the Nazis or their occult groups?
He actually met with Hitler to talk about his work. But in the end, Schauberger got disillusioned with the Nazi regime. He felt that their ideology was totally opposed to the natural order he was trying to work with.
That's a pretty powerful statement. It makes you wonder if the Nazis were trying to, twist Schauberger's work for their own destructive purposes. What happened to him after the war?
He was brought to the United States in 1958. The same year, by the way, that the Montauk Project supposedly shut down.
Is Moon suggesting that Schauberger might have been involved with the Montauk Project?
He claims that Schauberger was debriefed at Brookhaven National Laboratory. And that's supposedly where the whole Montauk Project was conceived.
Okay, that's a pretty clear link. It makes you think maybe Schauberger's implosion technology was part of the Montauk Project, and if so, what were they using it for?
It's a question Moon leaves open. But he does imply that Schauberger's might have been used for, let's say, less than noble purposes. Maybe even contributing to mind control or weather manipulation tech.
Okay, we are getting into some seriously mind-bending territory here. And Moon doesn't stop there. He connects his whole network to IG Farben, this powerful German chemical company.
Oh yeah, IG Farben. Yeah. They had a huge global network, tons of influence. And they were allegedly involved in espionage and maybe even aiming for world domination.
Hold on, a chemical company trying to take over the world? Sounds like a James Bond villain.
It does, doesn't it? But Moon presents evidence of their connections to some important people in the U.S., like William Donovan, the founder of the OSS, the precursor to the CIA.
So IG Farben was secretly working with the U.S. government.
Moon suggests their relationship was complicated. Sometimes they collaborated, but sometimes they competed, or even manipulated each other. It wasn't a simple good guy, bad guy situation.
This is really making me rethink history. Seems like there was a lot happening behind the scenes. What else does Moon say about IG Farben?
He points out their connection to this guy, Leo Crowley. Crowley was a big deal. He headed the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, was president of a utility company, and during World War II, he was the alien property custodian.
Alien property custodian? What was that?
Basically, Crowley was in charge of all the enemy property confiscated during the war, including stuff taken from the German Bund on Long Island.
Wait, the same Long Island where Camp Siegfried and Brookhaven National Laboratory are?
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Moon points out that Crowley had financial ties to a bank connected to Nazi Germany.
The plot thickens. All these threads are starting to come together. Where does this deep dive take us next?
Well, Moon then dives into this Nazi obsession with finding the Ark of the Covenant.
Like the Ark of the Covenant from Indiana Jones, the one that melts faces.
That's the one. Supposedly holds the Ten Commandments. The Nazis thought it had, ultimate power.
But is the Ark even real? I always thought it was just a biblical story.
Yeah, historians and theologians debate whether it actually existed. But Moon presents it as this real object that the Nazis were actively hunting for. He even claims they were looking for this mysterious substance called occultum that was supposedly inside the Ark.
Occultum? Sounds like something out of alchemy. What is this stuff?
Moon describes it as this powerful force that can transmute matter and connect to the blueprint of creation. He suggests it might be connected to ancient Egyptian practices, and secret knowledge passed down through occult traditions.
Okay, so we're talking about a substance that can potentially alter reality. That's a pretty big claim. Is there any historical evidence for this occultum stuff?
Well, Moon points to the historical use of mummy dust for healing. Some people believe this dust contained occultum. And it wasn't just, ground up mummies like some historians claim.
Mummy dust, that's a little creepy, to be honest. But I guess it fits into this whole idea of hidden knowledge and ancient practices. What else does Moon connect to this occultum?
He brings up the Tibetan word lamb and how it's connected to the swastika. But he's not talking about the Nazi symbol, He's talking about the ancient meaning of the swastika, which represents the way or the path.
So he's linking this ancient Tibetan concept to the Nazis' search for occult power.
Exactly. It's another piece of the tapestry he's creating, connecting these seemingly unrelated cultures and traditions to this big story of hidden knowledge and the pursuit of power.
Okay, I'm starting to see how Moon builds his case. It's like he's putting together a puzzle using all these different pieces to create a bigger, more complex picture. Where does he take us from here?
Well, Moon then shifts his focus to Tibet, this land full of mystery and spiritual traditions.
Tibet. I know it's been a source of fascination for Westerners for ages, but what's its connection to Nazi occultism?
Moon suggests that the Nazis were drawn to Tibet because they were looking for, ancient wisdom and occult power. He claims that Tibetan lamas had secrets that could give them control over reality itself.
So the Nazis weren't just interested in conquering land, they wanted spiritual and metaphysical power, too.
Yeah, that's right. They saw these esoteric traditions as a source of untapped power, something they can use to advance their agenda.
That's a pretty chilling thought. Did the Nazis actually send expeditions to Tibet?
They did, actually. Moon gives historical evidence of these expeditions, and he suggests that they might have found something important there, although it's not clear what exactly it was.
Okay, I'm hooked. What were they hoping to find in Tibet?
He says they were searching for a substance that could make people live longer and enhance their consciousness. Moon links this to the Bon religion, an ancient Tibetan tradition that came before Buddhism. It's said to hold deep esoteric knowledge.
So we're talking about the Nazis searching for immortality and, superpowers?
It's definitely a possibility. Moon's careful not to say any of this is absolute fact, but he raises some interesting questions about the Nazis' motives and how far they were willing to go.
It's definitely fascinating, if a bit unsettling. This exploration of the potential links between history, occultism, and hidden knowledge. What other mind-blowing connections does Moon reveal in The Black Sun?
Well, he connects the Nazi quest for power to their search for the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. He suggests they believed these objects were the key to manipulating the morphogenetic grid.
The morphogenetic grid, I've heard of that, but I'm not sure I get it. Can you explain it?
Think of it like a blueprint for reality, this field of information that influences how everything develops. Moon suggests that the Nazis thought they could manipulate this grid to control human evolution, like reshape the world based on their ideology.
So they were talking about controlling the very fabric of reality. That's a pretty powerful idea.
Yeah.
And a little scary. Did they actually manage to manipulate the morphogenetic grid?
It's not clear if they got any real results, but Moon presents it as part of this big narrative about their quest for ultimate power, driven by, occult beliefs and this desire to control the forces of creation.
This has been a truly mind-bending deep dive. Before we move on, can you remind us of the main themes Moon explores in The Black Sun?
Absolutely. He's highlighting the connections between Nazi occultism, secret societies, advanced technology, and this search for ultimate power. He suggests that these seemingly separate areas are all linked in ways we might not fully grasp, like a hidden web of influence that could even be affecting us today.
It's a lot to process, but super fascinating. Okay, what other fascinating and unsettling connections does Moon uncover in his exploration of the Black Sun?
He goes into this concept of the Black Sun, not like a real sun in space, but more like a symbol. It represents the ultimate source of power, the void where everything comes from.
The Black Sun as the void. That's a lot to unpack. What does that have to do with the Nazis?
Moon argues that the Nazis were trying to tap into that power, that source, through, searching for occult artifacts, experimenting with technology, and even trying to manipulate the morphogenetic grid.
So it wasn't enough to conquer countries. They wanted to control, the essence of reality itself.
It seems that way. Pretty dangerous ambition, don't you think? Trying to control something so powerful, so fundamental.
Definitely sounds like a recipe for disaster. You could even say their downfall was because they overreached, trying to grab hold of forces they didn't understand.
Interesting point. Makes you wonder about the consequences of messing with things we don't fully get.
It's a cautionary tale for sure. Does Moon think these occult forces are still at work today, though?
He definitely hints at it. Like, there are these hidden networks and agendas operating behind the scenes, maybe even influencing events on a global scale. He seems to be saying, hey, be aware of these forces. They could be affecting your life.
Going through The Black Sun, I've noticed this recurring theme. This idea of duality, light and dark, creation and destruction, good versus evil.
Good catch. Duality is a big concept in a lot of occult traditions, that these opposing forces are always at play, shaping our destiny.
And it feels like the Nazis were trying to, rig the game in their favor, to twist these forces to get what they wanted.
That's a common thread in Moon's book. He suggests their obsession with power and control ultimately led to their downfall. They were coming from a place of fear and hate, wanting to dominate instead of understand.
So what's the alternative? If the Nazis had the wrong approach, what's the right way to deal with these forces?
Moon seems to be saying that true power comes from understanding. From working with these forces, not trying to exploit them. It's about balance, not control.
That's a powerful message. And it's relevant today, too. We're facing similar challenges now with technology, politics, the environment, all these things coming together in ways that could have huge consequences.
Absolutely. Moon's exploration of Nazi occultism is a warning, but also a wake-up call. He's telling us to question what we're told, to be careful about the information we consume, and to realize that reality might be much stranger and more complicated than we think.
This deep dive has definitely opened my mind to a whole new world of possibilities. We've covered so much, from invisibility experiments to Tibetan rituals, from this mysterious occultum stuff to the legend of a blue-skinned race. It's been a wild ride.
It really has. Moon has given us a lot to think about.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about after this deep dive?
I think Moon wants us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to consider that there might be forces at work in the world that we don't fully understand. He's saying, be aware, be informed, and be active in shaping the future.
Well said. This deep dive has given me a lot to chew on, and I have a feeling we'll be revisiting these themes in future episodes. Until then, stay curious, keep asking questions. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of the Black Sun.